You may be old enough to remember the classic TV show The $6 Million Man. It's about a fictional test pilot and former astronaut named Steve Austin, whose aircraft crashes and who is then turned into a bionic secret agent. But what you might not know is that the opening sequence, which depicted Steve Austin's crash, is footage from a real incident with a real hero.
It's May 10, 1967, at Edwards Air Force Base in California. NASA is testing the M2F2, an unpowered lifting body aircraft, by dropping it from a B-52 at 44,000 feet. Pilot Bruce Peterson is at the controls. Fuzzy black and white ground footage shows the triangular vehicle descending from the sky, but there appears to be a problem. The vehicle rocks back and forth, nearly flipping upside down.
Peterson, bring.
Then, seconds later, it slams hard into the ground and tumbles across the desert. Whoa, take another look. The M2F2 flips over multiple times.
It starts to tumble around, there's smoke billowing out the sides, and ultimately it looks like a pretty awful plane crash.
So what is Peterson out here risking it all for?
This video was shot in 1967, which was really the height of the space race. There was significant pressure by the United States government to try and develop as much cutting-edge technology as possible to allow for the moon mission to occur and ultimately beat the Soviet Union.
This wrecked craft was part of a 12-year NASA mission to develop a new concept in spaceflight.
The idea was simple. We needed to get astronauts from outer space back to Earth in a controlled way. Early space flight was all done by capsules, so the return to Earth was in basically a metal sort of cone-shaped object that was strapped to a parachute, and you couldn't really control it. The M2F2 was a lifting body designed to basically enter the atmosphere and land much like an airplane would land.
The M2F2 had 15 successful test flights before it crash-landed in this now-famous footage. But why did that 16th flight go so wrong? And what happened to the pilot?
First, let's explain how the M2F2 is supposed to work.
Unlike a traditional aircraft that achieves flight through conventional wings, the M2F2, its entire body of its aircraft is the wing. It is able to sustain flight by the air pressure coming underneath it. When you're re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, coming from outer space, you're being exposed to a lot more air friction, heat, all of the forces that would potentially rip apart a conventional aircraft because of that increased drag surface of a winged conventional aircraft. So the lifting body of the aircraft are really ideal to travel fast back into the Earth's atmosphere.
So what went wrong? It looks like we can see the moment the trouble begins right here.
As you go slower and slower, your control surfaces are less and less effective. You can get into what's called a pilot-induced oscillation, where maybe you're pointed too far to the right, and so you put in a big input, and you start to swing the other way, and you get into these wild swinging motions that can be very, very dangerous.
Peterson is able to regain control of the aircraft, but he's not out of danger yet.
Because of the instability, a lot of his runway markers that he would be using to guide him for his landing were no longer visible, and you also had another aircraft, this rescue helicopter, in his line of sight now. You've got threat of a collision.
These distractions may have played a role in Peterson's inability to extend his landing gear in time. However, the crash did provide engineers with some much-needed information.
One of the things that came out of this is the realization that the dual fin design that actually didn't stabilize it, made it more unstable.
So they added a vertical tail fin that provided stability, and that was enough of an improvement that the whole program was able to progress and ultimately arrived at the space shuttle, the crowning achievement of the U.S. space program.
And fortunately, despite the horrific crash, test pilot Bruce Peterson survived, though he did go blind in his right eye from an infection he got while hospitalized. While his story and this footage join the $6 Million Man as part of TV history.
The takeaway? The crash was due to pilot-induced oscillation, and Peterson losing sight of the runway markings. Plus, that helicopter didn't help. And while Peterson didn't become a bionic secret agent, he was a hero, playing a key role in America's space program.